Hey, y'all, I'm Asante Tracey, and this is Real Talk Shorts. Real performers, real perspectives on AI. Now, if any of you have been following along with our Facebook posts and some of the emails that we've been sending out, you know that we're in IPA negotiations right now. And some are calling this one of the most historic sessions we've ever been a part of. And that's namely because of one of the big talking issues, which is AI. Now, today I have with me John Cleland, who happens to be not only an ACTRA Toronto councillor, but a co-chair on the subcommittee for AI. John, it's awesome to have you here. I'm so excited to dive into this with you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
To Real Talk. Why don't you share with our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and then your connection to AI?
Well, I became an actor professionally in 1995, joined ACTRA in 1999, and then when the NCA lockout happened almost 1,000 days ago, I decided I had to get more involved. So now I serve on the executive at ACTRA Toronto. I'm a national councillor and, as you say, the AI subcommittee co-chair.
Nice.
And also I represent ACTRA on an AI labor table that's been organized with the OFL, the Ontario Federation of Labour, and the NDP.
Wow. Okay, so you wear a lot of hats.
A few.
A few. That's fantastic. Okay, let's set the stage. All right. What is it that you want union and non-union members alike to understand about AI and its implications, for our future and the future of our industry?
So I think at the granular level, we have to understand there's sort of two types of AI that really impact our industry.
Okay.
There's digital replicas, which are basically when they take your biometrics and then they can turn you into a puppet to be used at their discretion.
Oh, fun.
And then there's generative AI.
Okay.
And generative AI, as defined in the agreement, and I'm going to read this, because I think it's important. It defines it as a subset of artificial intelligence that learns patterns from data and produces content based on those patterns to generate a synthetic performer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me try and just put that in a nutshell. So basically, it's like scouring the internet for information, what already exists out there, and then creating that digital puppet.
Yeah.
With you. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily of you. So generative AI can be, they can take your performance and take aspects of it. I think of it as a giant soup. Okay. So all the data on the internet exists as this giant soup, and AI models or agents can go out and scrape the internet for, let's say, Asante Tracey's performances. And it'll go through and scrape all that together, and then it can create. I use that loosely because it really isn't creating anything. It's just amalgamating
it's
data.
Basically piecing together.
And spitting out some kind of representation of you that can be a little different and therefore not recognizably you.
Exactly. And obviously that opens up an entire can of worms as far as consent, control, and compensation. We're going to dive into that later. So I don't want to... Yeah. Let's continue. You're saying... So there's the digital replicas, there's a generative AI.
With generative AI, I think think about ChatGPT,
right,
and Sora or Luma. Those are kind of the what I think of when I think of generative AI.
Okay. I guess what I'm wondering is, what are some of the specific areas within the SAG-AFTRA agreement that bring up a little concern for you, and then, on a kind of a lighter note, how might we be able to capitalize on those during our negotiations?
So I want to be clear that I'm speaking as a member of ACTRA Toronto, just a member. I'm not speaking as the executive. Right. Any position I'm taking here does not reflect the position of ACTRA.
Amazing.
And it's not a criticism necessarily of the agreement that SAG-AFTRA did agree to, because we have to remember that was done a year ago. Well, the technology has exploded since then.
Right.
And it's evolving and changing. So at the time, they didn't have all the information we have today.
Exactly.
So when people come to me and they say, hey, are we getting the same protections they got in the SAG-AFTRA agreement? I say, I hope we're getting better.
Yeah.
because it's an evolving technology. It's a disruptive technology. We need to stay. We need to keep it as a living document that changes not just every 3 years, but every maybe 3 months.
Yeah.
Because that's how quick the technology changes.
Oh, that's great. So some of those specific areas, I mean, where might we do better then?
Well, a major area that I see some problems with is on consent.
Okay.
Where right now in the agreement, consent can be conditional, or your consent can be a condition of the employment.
Oh, okay.
So when you get the job,
Yeah.
and sometimes before you get the job, you will have to sign something that says you're comfortable with them taking a digital replica of you or creating a digital replica of you by taking a scan of your biometrics.
And should you say, I'm not comfortable with that, well, there goes the job.
That's right.
Now.
Yeah.
That's not great.
No.
That's not great.
No, and it just means that actors who have the leverage to say, hey, no, I'm not going to do that, or if I do that, then you have to dispose of and delete and destroy that replica afterwards. Otherwise, there's no provisions in the SAG-AFTRA agreement for the use of that replica after they have used it for its intended use.
And that's, and again, like, how would you even go about ensuring that it was entirely deleted? In this digital age, like, it feels like there's a footprint of everything everywhere all the time, right? So that's okay. So yeah, I can see that being fairly problematic.
Which is why you have a collective bargaining agreement, so that you can negotiate the behaviors on both sides of the issue, right? So we're asking producers to respect our biometrics, even though we don't have full coverage by the legislation in our country or even in the world.
So I know that we have the 3Cs as kind of the basis of our approach to the AI negotiations when it comes to the IPA. There's consent, control, and compensation. How do control and compensation factor into this?
Yeah, it's interesting because the agreement that SAG-AFTRA got doesn't actually address how the data or the replica is disposed of after it's used.
Okay.
So that has to be negotiated by the individual performer.
Interesting.
Which is, it creates some issues.
Yeah.
So, for example, often producers will use a third party to take the scan and scan your biometrics.
Yeah.
There's very little language in the agreement that restricts them from how the third party uses it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're hardly even addressed.
Wow. Okay.
They're given the right to do it in the agreement, but they're not policed on how they use the data once it's taken.
Jeez. All right. Okay.
There's also the issue around what happens when you die. If you've given consent for your image or your likeness or your biometrics to be used in life, there's no provision to stop that consent after you die.
Wow. Okay.
The producer has an obligation to try to find you, and the language in there is they say if a performer's authorized representative cannot be identified or located, then it is the union who can give consent.
The union? Oh, the union.
For the use of your replica.
Hey.
Yeah.
Well,
just kind of problematic.
That seems strange and challenging to me.
Yeah. And the consent you give in your life continues after you die.
Wow. I guess in perpetuity, like,
I'm not sure about if it's in perpetuity or if it's just as long as that producer is using your image. So, for instance, if you're in a franchise or a Marvel movie or something like that, and you passed away, they could use your digital replica for as long as that franchise existed.
So what about biometric scans that were taken before an agreement with AI protection? So, because I feel like sometimes this happens pretty quickly. Like, I've been on set where all of a sudden, things have shifted, maybe you get an upgrade, that happens kind of on the spot.
Yeah.
So what happens if all of a sudden, let's say I'm on set and I haven't negotiated anything as far as AI is concerned, and they come to me and say, oh, we want to do a quick scan. We want to use you in subsequent episodes. We want to use it in this. If you give us your consent, we'll scan you and this and that. How does that work?
Well, I mean, the present situation, because there are no regulations on it, they can come up to you on set and say, we're going to take a biometric scan of you. And I've heard of many members who are being approached, and even more non-union members. It's just an accepted part of taking a job.
Yeah.
Is that you're going to get scanned, and there's no control, consent, or compensation on that, especially for non-union, but even for union, because we don't have an agreement with the producers yet.
Wow.
The CMPA is our...
Yeah, right. Wow, okay. So, I mean, I guess the thing that comes up for me when I hear this, John, is that, you know, I mean, again, I think it just reinforces the idea that this is a very historic round of negotiations for us. It feels like we need to move quick. It feels like we need to get these things in place, like, kind of yesterday.
Yep.
All right. But that given what we know now, there is opportunity for us, which I think is...
Yeah, we need
hope for, at least.
We need to understand, I think, how existential this threat is to us as performers. The difference between a human performance and an AI performance, and what is the value of the human performance, and can we convince producers who now are mainly tech companies, for whom the bottom line is really
what matters,
primary motivation.
Yeah,
and that's not their fault. It's their fiduciary duty to increase shareholder value.
Yeah, they're doing their job,
but studios used to have this, you know, this love of art. They were creating art. They also wanted to make some money,
of course,
but the money was not the primary mover. Now we're in an industry where money really, the bottom line is what's dictating this.
Yeah.
And if it's cheaper for them to use replicas than humans, I don't know how we stop them from doing that.
Wow. Okay. I mean, well, it's definitely something to chew on, right? And I suspect that there are options out there, but it's going to be important, you know, kind of as you have been doing, is, you know, do the research, get informed, you know, and again, with folks like yourself on council, and I know our bargaining team are incredibly passionate about fighting for us.
Yeah, we've got some great people on the bargaining team who, like my co-chair, Corey Doran's on the negotiating team.
I've heard him speak. It's
he knows his stuff. Alistair really knows his stuff. We've got a lot of people who are working very hard on this. That being said, I think it's really important for the membership to educate themselves.
Yes.
To spread this video, hopefully it'll be informative, but also to do the research and find out what the other unions are doing. You can go online and find out what the UK is aiming for in their negotiations. You can find out, you know, what the legislation is, which all is woefully underserviced.
Yeah.
In Canada, they came up with an idea for a law. It's called, what is it called? It's called the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act.
Okay.
In 2022, they started working on this, but it's been stuck in committee ever since.
Yeah. So, not very useful to us at this stage.
Well, the government has to understand that this is actually something they have to do now.
Yeah, it's happening now. And you know, you mentioned how we can look up the UK agreement, and it's like, this is really a global thing. This is not isolated to one particular country or one particular society. You know, this
or
is
an industry.
This is going to have to require like global mobilization around it, which is interesting. We were talking about the IPA negotiations and, you know, our role in that. Now, my feeling is that language is going to be such a pivotal factor in these negotiations, that certain language, such as substantially as scripted, performed, or recorded, really allows producers a lot of free rein when it comes to things. They can modify this, that, and the other. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of issues that could arise from this.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of where the language is kind of vague. And so the definition of what substantially is scripted, performed, or recorded is left up to the producer.
Yeah.
And the producers really want to be able to alter scenes in post.
Sure.
But my big contention on that is that we need to be able to consent.
100%.
And control how that is being done.
Yeah. I mean, God forbid, you know, and then old granny is watching, and next thing you know, geez.
Well, we've already seen examples of this where people's likenesses, including their voices,
or their voice,
have been stolen and used in porn. And there's no consent, no control, no compensation for that.
That's wild to me, that it can get to that state. And yeah, again, it just really hammers home the idea that, it's such an important round of negotiations. It's so important that we get this right. Again, language.
Yeah, language. Language is key. It really is.
Oh boy, and I love I can't help but acknowledge the delicious irony in that. Ours is a medium of language.
Yeah.
Right. And now it becomes incumbent upon us to harness language to protect our futures. There's a kind of a second arm to this, which is generative AI. Now, my understanding is that, the concern here is it allows producers to just train AI models to create synthetic versions of us in our likeness, voice, so on and so forth. What are some of the things that we need to be mindful of with generative AI?
Yeah, so generative AI is really dicey.
Okay.
My feeling on it is that we need a two-pronged approach.
Okay.
So there's the collective agreements that we have with our producers.
Right.
But they only can go so far. That's contract law.
Mm-hmm.
What we really need is governments to step in and legislate. In Canada, they need to change the copyright laws, and they need to. They've got a thing called the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, which they started working on back in 2022, but has been sitting in committees.
It's been dormant, hasn't it? Yeah.
And is not doing anything.
Well, okay, so I think probably one of the things our audience is wondering is what's the distinction between contract law and legislation? Like, how would that look on our end when it comes to enforcing some of these things?
Well, contract law, you need to hire a lawyer in order to pursue any damages.
Okay, which is not
resulting, which is not cheap, and I don't know many actors who can afford to do that. With legislation, federal legislation, let's say, or provincial, then that would be them taking on the enforcement of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay, so synthetic performers that are generated by AI, that, like, for example, I guess positions that were previously filled by humans, right? They can now be done digitally through AI. What are some of these positions in your mind, and what are kind of the resounding impacts that entails?
Huge.
Okay.
So let's first define generative AI.
Okay.
It's really when a producer trains generative AI models to go out and scrape the internet for data, they amalgamate it or learn from it, and then spit out some approximation of human behavior. So it's actually not necessarily your data alone.
Okay.
It's kind of a soup.
Oh, okay,
data,
right, yeah.
Where the model trains itself based upon the data in that soup. We don't know where that soup has come from, but it's anywhere on the internet, and it happens in a black box, so it's really difficult to enforce.
It would be very hard to trace and enforce,
really
given
hard to track
that model,
Yeah. So with specific implications, I think it affects all of us, really. So, right now we have, say, Star Trek has aliens on it, and it has fantasy life forms.
Yeah.
That has been performed and created by human actors in makeup, or puppeteers are also involved in that process. And that can now all be done by generative AI creating a model that goes out, scrapes the internet for alien life forms, and creates various possibilities.
You put together the right prompt, and you've got all of those covered. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I imagine background.
Background's a tough one. Background's really, and what SAG-AFTRA did was I think it's actually one of the most interesting approaches that they took, because what they used was quotas. Yeah. So for background performers under the SAG-AFTRA agreement now, they have a minimum number of performers, and I want to get this right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because we've talked about quotas before as a potential
control
for which I think is rather interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing with generative AI is it's so difficult to police, it's so difficult to track. That we really have to think outside of the box on how we're going to negotiate with the producers on this. So what SAG-AFTRA did for background performers is that they put a minimum number of background performers who need to be used. So they have 25 background performers for TV and 85 for films.
Okay.
You can use less than that.
Yeah.
But until you reach that threshold, you have to use humans. Then after that threshold, so if you use 35 background performers in a TV show, 10 of them could be AI generated.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. And I mean, to me, the reason I like that is because it's simple, it's straightforward.
Well,
there's very little room for blurring the lines on that one.
It's
right?
enforceable.
And it's enforceable. Key point there. It's enforceable.
Yeah.
Right. Stunt performers. Yeah. Right. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like the list just goes on and on.
Well, yeah. I mean, stunts are going to be hugely impacted by this, and the producers can argue, I think, very effectively that it's actually protecting performers to use AI generated or replicas rather than using a human being to do crazy stunts where stunt people are hurt.
Absolutely, but for me, at having been an action stunt performer before, I think that's part of the thrill of the gig.
It's a skill set.
It's a skill set.
We have an incredible group of stunt performers in this country.
We sure do.
And they're going to be met with, so in SAG-AFTRA's agreement, if I'm a performer whose character needs to do a stunt, I will be offered the opportunity to use my replica and be compensated for that rather than using a stunt double.
So, John, at this point, I can't help but wonder what our members can do at this stage, right, to help support some of those really important protections against AI that we've discussed so far.
Well, I think there's, keeping in mind the two-pronged approach, there's got to be pressure on the MPs and MPPs to follow through on getting some legislation to control the use of AI. Yeah. And there's a petition on our website at ACTRA Toronto called You're Not a Robot.
Yeah, that's a great one. If you haven't already signed that, please do. This is exactly the type of stuff that can help, shift the tide and change the future for us. So check it out.
And it's a simple thing to do. Because
and it's so easy,
It's set up on there. It'll locate your MPP and MP and just spit out the letters to those folks. So that's a really important part of this, because right now AI is being policed by the corporations that are using the AI. Yeah. And they're driven by a profit motive.
Exactly.
So we need the government to come in and protect communities from the possible effects of just using profit as the only decision-making tool, which is their fiduciary responsibility in the world that we've
fair. But when it comes to the use of AI as a holistic idea, it's about ensuring that there's still an element of humanity in the AI.
And our industry is so often a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the sectors.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we haven't put enough pressure on the government in the past to shape the way that they construct their legislation. Yeah. This is an opportunity I don't think our membership can pass up.
Yeah,
we have to be proactive.
Yeah, I hear you.
And then another thing the members can do is start paying closer attention to what's happening in negotiations and support your union in those negotiations. Now, that doesn't just mean, saying, great, guys, we have your back no matter what you do. It's writing to your councillors and saying, these are my priorities.
Let's leave on this note. Are there some hopeful thoughts that you have towards this whole crazy thing that we call AI?
No. Okay. Yes. A little bit. I mean, there are elements out there who are working really hard to find an approach to lessening the impact on our community. I would encourage everybody to look at Credo 23, which is basically it's an identifier for art that is being created without using AI. Okay. And so the idea behind it is to put the control in the consumer's hands. So if consumers are happy consuming content that has been AI generated, very well. If they're not, then they can seek out Credo 23 as an emblem on whatever art they're looking at, and only consume that art.
Okay.
And so it's sort of sending a message to the industry that I'm more interested in seeing humans do this than this sort of beige, bland, derivative AI crap, which it will become because it is derivative. It's not a creative process.
Yes, this is something that's really been, articulated. Okay, that's okay. That's hopeful. I like that.
There's also other organizations like NAVA. NAVA is the North American Association of Voice Actors, and they've created a rider, which I encourage everybody to go to NAVA, NAVA, and download that rider. Encourage your agent to attach it to any projects that you're working on. It just protects your data.
Okay. Very important.
So that's something I find hopeful is that there are people out there who are working really hard to try to get these protections in place. The final hopeful thing that I want to encourage all the membership to do is start participating.
Yes.
If you haven't participated before, get involved. Join a committee or, read your emails. The emails are getting really good, especially ACTRA Toronto is putting out some really informative emails. Read them because they will keep you up to date on what's going. Come to council meetings if you want. Run for council. These are all ways for you to participate in in how your livelihood is going to be preserved. So that gives me hope that we have more engagement now than we've had in years.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic, and John, it's one of my beliefs too, is that when we start making this part of the general public conversation and we take, not only an active role, but a very impassioned role in this, because like you said, it's in no uncertain terms, it's the fight of our lives.
Yeah, right? It really is.
And, it's for our livelihoods, and I couldn't think of a more opportune time for ourselves and our membership to get involved and to really kind of dictate the way forward.
And if you're watching this video, send it to 2 friends.
There you go.
And have them send it to 2 friends, because I think, and any of the videos, I think we just need to get the word out to people, and it's really hard from our position to reach all the membership. But if you take it upon yourself to spread the word, get the conversation happening around the dinner table, it'll really
that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
That's where it all starts. Well, speaking of conversations, John, it's been amazing having this conversation with you. I want to thank you so much for coming in today, getting real with us on Real Talk, and I really look forward to having you back when inevitably AI has advanced again and we have a whole new conversation to have.
Yes, we will.
All right, brother. Take care.
Thank you, man.
Cheers.
Nice to have.
Real Talk Shorts is filmed in the Gordon Pinsent studio at ACTRA Toronto. This episode was written, directed, and produced by Kenton Blythe, edited and produced by Cass Enright.